Hello, everyone. I'm Jeremiah William McCarthy. I'm the chief curator here. I'm also the curator of American Art, and I want to welcome you all to Topographies of Dissent, Armenian Art from the Dodge Collection. It's a very exciting exhibition that's been spearheaded by my wonderful colleague, Yulia Tulovsky, the head of the Department of Soviet Nonconformist Art. And two wonderful guest curators who I have the pleasure of meeting this week, Lilit and Armen, who Yulia will be introducing in just a second. This is a very exciting exhibition, I think, for the museum, because if you visited the museum over the previous years, you might notice the sort of like three main departments that we have: the American wing, the European wing, and the Dodge wing. Were all kind of sometimes viewed through the lens of a specific site, whether that's for the American wing, kind of New York and the East Coast, the European wing through Paris, and the Dodge wing through Moscow. And so I think that this exhibition does a lot to sort of like disentangle that and to start to show new places, kind of look at the things we've possibly overlooked in the past, kind of tell new stories. So that's sort of one of the things that excites me about what this exhibition is doing sort of for our internal goals. But I think externally what's exciting about this exhibition is if you're New Yorkers and you remember the big Armenian art show at the Met, that show ended in the 17th century. And when you went to that show, no matter how amazing you thought that show was, you were sort of like, okay, well, what's next in a way? And I think this show is very important in demonstrating the kind of what's next and showing that Armenian art is something that is a living culture by artists in the modern and contemporary period who are quarreling with some of the same issues that artists across the globe were for in the global contemporary. So I think for those reasons, this is an important show for us. Beyond that, I hope when you see the show, you'll notice how good everything looks. It's like a lot of this work, and Yulia could attest to this perhaps, about 6 or 9 months ago, it didn't look this great. We've sent it all out for conservation, and it came back from sort of like the museum world's plastic surgeons, wonderfully rested and hydrated after a weekend at the spa. But I think it's really important that work because you're able to see just how extraordinary some of these pictures are. And of course, that work is only possible through the support of people like you, of the support of people like the late Norton Dodge and Nancy Dodge and the Avenir Endowment and the Dodge Charitable Trust, which allows us to actually do this work. So please, let's a round of applause for yourselves and our supporters of our institution. And then the final round of applause, I would just like to talk for a second about how amazing our staff is. You know, to kind of marshal a show like this, it takes a lot of people, and you've all really kind of got to be singing the same song. So to have the exhibition coordinator, the registrars, the curators, the guest curators, everybody just coming together to kind of make this show possible, please. I'm going to give the show over to Yulia now, but let's have one round of applause for our amazing staff here at the center. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremiah, for such a wonderful introduction. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight for this panel discussion. And it is my great pleasure to welcome our two distinguished guests tonight. Lilit Sargsyan is one of Armenia's leading art critics and art historians and curators based in Yerevan. Her work primarily focuses on the history of Armenian modern and contemporary art, within the broader context of the socio-political history of the USSR and the post-Soviet, post-Stalin era. She's a professor at the State Academy of Fine Arts in Armenia, and she often collaborates with museums as an independent curator and organizes her own curatorial projects. She's also a co-founder of AICA Armenia, the Armenian section of the International Association of Art Critics. Armen Yesayants is also a leading art historian, art manager, and curator based in Yerevan. He serves as director of exhibition at Kafesyan Center for the Arts, which is Armenia's leading institution for modern and contemporary art. And he joined the center in 2012 and curated and co-curated over 50 exhibitions there. He also is co-author and co-host of Arta Savor, the only Armenian podcast dedicated to modern and contemporary art. And he was curator for Armenian National Pavilion at the 60th Venice Art Biennial in 2024. Armen holds a PhD in art history from Yerevan State University and MA in Arts and Cultural Management from King's College London. So together with Lilit and Armen, we collaborated on this exhibition, Topographies of Dissent. And this is the first exhibition from the Dutch collection devoted exclusively to Armenian modern and contemporary art. And it is, as Jeremiah mentioned, opens a new page in the museum history, I hope. And the Armenian holdings of the Dutch collection include approximately 80 artists and hundreds of individual pieces. So it was a very challenging choice, but also a very exciting one. And we hope to introduce the exhibition to you today. And I would like to start with the question to Armen, who coins the title for the show, Topographies of Dissent. Can you speak of how this title resonates with the themes in the artworks presented at the show?
First of all, good day to everyone. Very nice to be here. Even more, I'm very honored to be part of this amazing panel, this stunning exhibition that we did for the last year already. Thank you, Julia, and of course Jeremiah, for the very great presentation of Lilit and myself. We tried to we need to be more humble. It's too much what you are putting out there, presenting as leaders and the best curators and art historians from Armenia. But we are really very, very happy to be here and be part of this initiative and be part of the exhibition that is connected to the Dutch collection, which I need to say is a gem. Around the world, it is celebrated, especially among the artists and art historians, curators and scholars who are focused on modern and contemporary art related to the Soviet period. So whenever you mention that you might do something at Zimmerli, they're like, oh, Dutch collection, Dutch collection. So you are very lucky to have this collection here. What about the title? Well, the word topography is mostly about geography, but when you put it in another context, it's somehow we are trying to show the map of different layers of how artists could be could be non-conformist or resistant to the ideology and to the socialist realism perspective during the Soviet period. And that's why topography is a very broad idea in this context. When we talk about topography of dissent, it's trying to understand how different artists of different generations were moving through this landscape of nonconformism. That was the main idea. But what is really important here, I guess, is to understand what is dissent mean also. When we are talking about Dutch collection, particularly when we are talking about nonconformist art, people assume that they should see something very political or rebellious. But when you dig into the idea of socialist realism during the Soviet period, anyone who would not convert to that ideas, to that ideology, or would do something that was that would be called by officials or particular groups as formalism. Those artists, which are most of the artists presented here, would be considered as non-conformists, but not in the idea that they were persecuted somehow or were suppressed. Not always was that the case. But these artists were those who were they had a very challenging career. Not to be exhibited, not to be part of the artists' union, trying to do a lot of stuff just to survive as an artist. So that's the main idea. Not all the artists, of course, included here, but most of them, especially those who present the 70s and 80s. I think I'm going another route here because your question was very specific, but I think what I was referring in the title, I think I already covered that.
Thank you, Armen. But to continue a little bit in the theme of dissent, so what are the features that, how dissent was expressed in Armenian, and was it different from how it was expressed in other republic across the Soviet Union? Can you address this? Maybe Lilit would say a couple of words about this.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming and join us. I apologize. I would like to speak Russian, if you don't mind, and Armen will help him with translation. In Armenian? Yes. It's no problem. Okay. Անչափ ուրախ եմ եւ մեծ պատիվ է ինձ համար նույնպես այստեղ գտնվել այս իրոք շատ ունիկալ ցուցահանդեսին.
I'm very happy, and it's also an honor for me to be here at this really unique exhibition.
Շուրջ 2 տարի մենք Յուլիայի հետ արդեն աշխատում ենք, համագործակցում ենք։ Նախ մեր համագործակցությունը սկսվեց կայքի վրա աշխատելով, եւ ես ուզում եմ այս առիթը օգտագործել եւ իմ մեծ շնորհակալությունը հայտնել Յուլիային անձամբ եւ Zimmerli թանգարանին այս ցուցահանդեսը իրականացնելու համար։
I've started working on the Zimmerli collection as a researcher around 2 years ago. First of all, for the website that is now being developed by the Zimmerli Art Museum, and she's just Lilit is using her opportunity to say thank you, particularly to Yulia and to Zimmerli Art Museum for putting together this amazing exhibition and for the opportunity to work and to research the collection for the future website.
Հիմա անդրադառնամ Յուլիայի հարցին, որը ամենակարևոր եւ թիրախային հարցերից մեկն է այս կոնտեքստում։
Now I will try to cover the question by Yulia, which may be the most essential and core question here.
Մենք բոլորս գիտենք, որ խորհրդային միությունը դա մի մեծ կայսրություն էր, որը բաղկացած էր 16 հանրապետություններից, որոնցից յուրաքանչյուրը շատ առանձնահատուկ էին եւ շատ առանձնահատուկ կերպով էին արձագանքում խորհրդային իրականությանը։ Հայաստանը ամենաառանձնահատուկներից մեկն էր, նախ եւ առաջ իր հարուստ մշակութային ավանդույթների եւ ազգային խնդիրների պատճառով։
Well, we all know that Soviet Union was a huge empire of 16 different republics, and all of them were very different from one another, and all of them were reflecting or somehow answering to the limitations of the Soviet ideology in their own way. And Armenia might be one of the most unique republics in this perspective, considering the rich cultural heritage and also the national issues that were in the context of Armenian reality in that period.
Եվ ամենակարևորը, որ պետք է ասենք, Հայաստանը նաև որովհետև պերիֆերիկ հանրապետություն էր, ի տարբերություն կենտրոնի եւ մյուս հանրապետությունների, որոնք ավելի մոտ էին Ռուսաստանին, բավական լիբերալ երկիր էր եւ Խրուշչովյան ծնհալից հետո մեր տեղի իշխանությունների հայրենասիրության եւ լիբերալիզմի շնորհիվ Հայաստանում հնարավոր եղավ մոդեռնիզմի աննախադեպ վերելք եւ 72 թվի թանգարանի հիմնումը դրա վառ օրինակն է։
Also, we need to consider that, well, Armenia, as some other countries, were on a periphery of this huge empire, and compared to other republics which were closer to the center, to Moscow, Armenia was comparably more liberal. And after the period of Khrushchev thaw, post-Stalinist period, especially in 60s and 70s, well, thanks to the local Armenian officials and their patriotism, there was an opportunity for many artists to pursue the modernist approach in art.
Այս ցուցահանդեսում մենք ներկայացրել ենք այդ
I'm sorry, I didn't highlight the final part of her answer, which is very important. That's how in 1972, Armenia was the only republic that opened a museum of modern art throughout the Soviet Union. It was the only and the first official museum of modern art, which was opened in 1972, which was also due to this comparably liberal situation.
Մենք այս էքսպոզիցիայում աշխատել ենք ցույց տալ այդ 1960-ից մինչև 80-ականների ազգային խորհրդային մոդեռնիզմը եւ անցումը անկախության շրջանի առավել ռադիկալ արվեստագետների միջոց իդեմս առավել ռադիկալ արվեստագետների, որոնք արդեն բերեցին բոլորովին նոր պոստմոդեռնիստական իրավիճակ հայ ժամանակակից արվեստը.
So what we did throughout this exhibition, we tried to cover all these different stages, starting from 60s and 70s, this rise of national Soviet modernism period. In general, just out of the context, national modernism is a coined term in Armenian art history, which is related to 60s and 70s. And also what we did throughout this exhibition, we also showed the transitional period in 80s and 90s. So you can see when the new generation of more radical artists would come and the period of postmodernist era would overtake.
Well, thank you, Lilit. To continue this conversation, maybe you could briefly highlight for us and for our audience the main kind of highlights of, since we are sitting in this galleries, so maybe you could highlight a few works in particular and a few themes that the exhibition covers. Or it's the question to both, actually.
Yeah, I can start and Lilit can then continue, I guess. So what we did here, if you look at the exhibition, it has 5 different sections. And when you come to the exhibition, what I love about this, because we saw it in person only like around 10 days ago. And when we're coming to the exhibition and you can see the first piece from afar, the beautiful, delicate landscape of an Armenian cathedral by a renowned women artist, Armine Galens, who was from diaspora. She repatriated to Armenia in late 1940s. When you see, well, this is very lovely Armenian landscape, very particular for the national modernist period. And then you come and see the title of the exhibition with all the material and explanation what this is about. And there is this beheaded statue of Lenin just next to this text. So with these 2 particular pieces, you can just at the beginning of the show understand the whole scale of the exhibition. So what this is about, it is not only just modernist, very European art, but also this is about the period of the collapse of this huge empire, which brought to all these transitions and transformations. And when we start the exhibition, we see this part with landscape. Why landscapes? Because landscapes were this genre that artists would go, which was both safe, but also a genre where you could somehow show your modernist mindset. So nobody could tell you, why are you doing this landscape? What is this about? And also why there are churches in this landscape, because it's part of the national culture. That was the idea, especially considering the Soviet Union. Why are you putting churches on your landscape? Well, it's not just churches. We tried artists, what they did, they were trying to trick the officials, like, oh, it's not churches, there is nothing spiritual or really religious there. They are part of Armenian architecture from medieval period, which is very important. That's why we are putting this here. And the artists presented in that section, especially two of them. One is with this lovely, very little piece on paper, art piece on paper by Martiros Sargsyan. It's just to point out where Armenian art of 20th century comes from, because Martiros Sargsyan was a monumental figure. He was so influential in the first part of the 20th century that I always do this joke about that many artists from that period, younger generation, there was like no artist who wouldn't have a Sargsyan-esque period in their career. They all start with this huge influence, and then they would move on with this modernist and other ideas. And Sargsyan, he himself was central figure in Moscow avant-garde scene in the early 20th century, being part of different groups where many of them they moved to France later, etc. So with Sargsyan starting landscape and putting out there these other artists like Minas Avetisyan, who is considered to be the most important artist of the national modernist period, and especially when we are talking about the Museum of Modern Art, opened in 1972, and it was opened by an art historian and very like this charismatic figure, a collector as well, Henrik Igitsyan. He supported Minas Avetisyan very much. So with Sargsyan and Minas Avetisyan, these are two older and younger generation artists who somehow show this very Armenian landscape and very, well, so-called, you know, in quotes, Armenian art with these colors, with these landscapes, and also other artists, of course, Armen Egalens from diaspora. And next to it, the other wall is about the facets of formalism, which also starts with the representation of another very important figure of an older generation, Yerevant Kochar, who was born in Tbilisi, then he was in Paris, he was exhibited next to Picasso and Braque, he was like part of these avant-garde groups when in 2030, then he moved to Armenia, and he had a very harsh biography, but he became a very influential and central figure for the artists who are presented on that wall. So here we are, like with the first two walls to the left and to the right, we are showing two figures and their influence on other artists who were, for Yerevant Kochar, some of them even were his direct students, and how these two layers would overlap somehow, because it was going on next to another. It wasn't like opposite. Some artists from these, like they are very European, cubistic approach. Then there's artists like Henrik Elibekyan and from Elibekyan family, who would do everything started from cubistic artworks to performances and abstraction and assemblage in later on. But I think I'm going too much, and Lilit can continue from here.
Thank you, Armen. It's a very good explanation. Շարունակությունը, եթե մենք այս պատին նայենք, հայկական բնանկարի ավելի մոնոխրոմ, ավելի լիրիկական երկու տեսակներն են, որովհետև եթե այս վառ գույներով նկարչությունը գերիշխողն է եղել, ապա մենք ուզում ենք նաև ցույց տալ, որ կա նաև մոնոքրոմ, լիրիկական գծային տեսակը։
Well, opposite to this colorful landscape, which was more popular and more spread around the art community, we can see these monochromic art pieces to show like another approach. Well, about Armenian art and the landscape in general. So it wasn't only that. That was the idea, to show also this other approach. And with Hakop Hakopian, for instance, we also show the influence of diaspora, and many artists from diaspora came also from countries where part of French or British colonies, with influences from European avant-garde of the first half of 20th century.
Մեր ցուցահանդեսի մյուս ամենակարևոր եւ ես կասեի առանցքային հատվածը աբստրակցիոնիզմն է եւ հրաշալի է, որ մենք հիմա նստած ենք հենց աբստրակցիոնիզմի գլխավոր պատիֆոնին.
And the other part of the exhibition is Armenian abstractionist art. And it is nice that we are now sitting in front of the central wall featuring abstract art.
Իհարկե ամերիկացիները կարող են ասել, ինչ մի առանձնահատուկ բան կա այս աբստրակցիոնիզմի մեջ, որովհետև աշխարհում վաղուց արդեն հայտնի էր եւ Կանդինսկին եւ Պոլոկը, 40-ականների աբստրակտ էքսպրեսիոնիզմը Ամերիկայում եւ այլ, բայց մենք պետք է հասկանանք, որ սա ունիկալ է այն առումով, որ ստեղծվել է իդեմս Սեյրան Խատլամաջանի խորհրդային ժամանակներում դեռևս, բայց գալիս էր նաև ազգային ակունքներից.
Well, I'm sorry. For an American audience, for the local audience, it might not be something unique. Well, what is so interesting about abstract art, considering that there already had been Kandinsky or later Pollock with abstract expressionism? So what is so unique about these pieces that are now considered so non-conformist or need to be featured here, or something really maybe captivating? But you should consider that these pieces were created in a environment that would restrict this. So this wasn't something really accepted. This was something that would never be exhibited. And here we can see, for instance, Seyran Khatlabajan with these two pieces on the left from me and on the right from you, that were created during the Soviet period.
Եվ մյուս արվեստագետը, որը դուք տեսնում եք հաջորդ թևին, Վիգեն Թաթևոսյան, արդեն անկախության շրջանի ռադիկալ արվեստագետների գուրուն էր եւ իմ մեջքի ետևում այս մեծ աշխատանքը, որը կոչվում է Բոբո, հեղինակը Գրիգոր Միքայելյան Քիքի, թերևս արդեն նոր ալիքի հայկական էքսպրեսիոնիզմի ամենավառ ներկայացուցիչներից մեկն է եւ հաջորդ սրահում դուք կարող եք տեսնել աբստրակցիոնիզմի բաժնի շարունակությունը, իդեմս էլի մի շարք կարևոր արվեստագետների, Սետ Սեմերջան, Արմեն Հաջյան, Վահան Ռումելյան.
And the other two pieces that you can see on the right, like parallel to Seyran Khatlamajans, these are paintings by Vigen Tatevosyan, who was not just an artist, he was also a scholar, a translator, and a guru for many artists from younger generation who would take a path of abstraction art. And he was from a later period of Armenian art, mostly from 70s, 80s. He was also an art director for a very important magazine in Soviet Armenia, which is called Garun, Spring. And this title is also not a coincidence. It was about this freedom as well. It was a place where many artists and poets would try to get published in. And the central piece is by Armenian artist whose nickname is Kiki. His name is Grigor Mikhailyan. And these series that he started doing in late 70s are called Bobo. So he has been doing these Bobos for over 40 years. And he is the representative of the more radical artists of already 80s and 90s, and he now also resides in the US, in California. And there are another couple of artists in the next gallery, against section of abstractionist art, like Vahan Rumelyan or Hajan or other names.
Հաջորդ բաժինը մեր ցուցահանդեսի շատ կարևոր է նրանով, որ ներկայացնում է արդեն պերեստրոյկայի եւ անկախության շրջանի, այսինքն խորհրդային միության կոլապսի շրջանի նոր ռադիկալ ավանգարդիստների սերունդը, Նրանք խմբավորվել էին երրորդ հարկ շարժման մեջ, նրանցից երկուսը իդեպ ներկա են, որի համար ես շատ ուրախ եմ, Էդվարդ Էնֆիաջյանը եւ Աշոտ Աշոտը, առիթ ունեք անձամբ ծանոթանալու իրենց հետ։
The other section is very important to be featured here because this is the artists, and mainly if you look at the dates of the pieces presented in the exhibition, most of them are from 80s, and this was the most interesting transition period from the Soviet Armenia to independence, especially considering the Gorbachev era, perestroika, the reconstruction or glasnost, the freedom of speech. So this liberal transition that's starting going on in the late 80s. And these artists from Third Floor Group, which was a group of younger artists doing exhibitions from 1987 until 1994. And we are lucky to have two of these artists present today, Ashot and Edward Enfiajan. They have now we have them here with us, and later maybe you can have an opportunity to talk to them and to ask your questions about their legacy and their artworks.
Շատ կարևոր է հասկանալ ինչ արեց այս սերունդը հայ արվեստի համար։ Գիտեք, Հայաստանում իրենց անվանում էին ապազգային, կոնսերվատորները իրենց համարում էին, որ իրենք դեմ են գնում ազգային ավանդույթներին, բայց մենք պետք է հասկանանք, որ այն Խորհրդային միության կոլապսի ժամանակներում շատ կարևոր էր համաշխարհային եւ արևմտյան մշակութային դիսկուրսի մեջ մտնելը, որի համար անպատճառ պետք էր եւ էսթետիկապես եւ գաղափարապես եւ հոգեբանորեն կտրվել բոլոր այն ավանդույթներից, որոնք կային մինչ այդ։
So this group of artists was very important in that period of Armenian art, because those artists were given names like anti-national and this kind of stuff, and it was very hard for them. But you need to understand that this was the period of this pursuit of independence and freedom, the Western values, the punk music, the breakdance, the graffiti art. So it was very important for them to leave all the national identities and try to get rid of that limitations, be more free, and to be part of this bigger picture and not only in this country and in the national milieu.
Եվ մեր ցուցահանդեսի վերջին բաժինը կապ չունի սերունդների կամ էսթետիկական նախապատվությունների հետ, այլ մենք այն կազմել ենք գաղափարական հենքի վրա, որը կոչվում է ընդհանրացված կերպով Չարիքի կայսրությունների դիստոպիաները։
And the final part of the exhibition it doesn't relate to any generation or group. That's why it features different artists from different aesthetics and backgrounds, but this is the dystopias of evil empire. So how different artists would react to the idea of the imperialistic regime and this kind of things.
Եվ վերջին բանը այս հարցի շուրջ, որ ուզում եմ ասել, այդ բաժնում դուք կարող եք տեսնել 70-80-ական թվականների գործեր, երբ դեռ խորհրդային միությունն էր եւ պերեստրոյկան անգամ չէր սկսվել, բայց դուք կարող եք արդեն տեսնել, որ արվեստագետների մտածողության մեջ խորհրդային միությունը արդեն վերացել էր։
And even though you can see artworks in those part of the exhibition from 70s and early 80s, which was this still the period of very strong Soviet reality, but you can see that for those artists, Soviet era was already done. So they already there, they felt that it's gonna end up and it's gonna collapse, and you can see that through their lens.
Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction to the show. Yes?
What is very important for us is also the central piece of the exhibition. If we are talking about the highlights, you can all see from other different angles the central piece of the exhibition by Hakop Hakopian, which with the title is a little bit anecdotic, to be fair. It doesn't sound anecdotic when you read it. It's just anecdotic when I tell you the story. So it says no to the neutron bomb. That's the title of the painting. So no fun there. But when Hagop Hagopian was creating this piece, he wasn't that radical, by the way. He wouldn't act like that or be part of the underground scene, whatever. But these artworks is maybe one of the most political pieces here, with the beheaded crowd, with this gray mass of people that just don't have any ideas, don't have any freedoms. They just go wherever the wind takes because that's the way they were born, they were raised. And when he created this piece, he didn't have any hope that it would ever be exhibited. But this was the period of the Cold War, when was this propaganda about the US creating the neutron bomb, and he came up a couple of articles, and he had the idea, okay, I will just put the title, No to Neutron Bomb, and that's how it will be exhibited. So it is not anti-war or like anti-neutron bomb or whatever it is. It was a very anti-Soviet piece. It was very non-conformist, but Hagop Hagopian, again, as many artists, tried to trick everyone, which did happen, and he just did the title like that. But for it was about the Soviet reality and socialist realism and everything going around that.
So I understand also that Hagop Hagopian repatriated to Armenia, and probably out of all Soviet republics, Armenia had the largest diaspora abroad, which certainly influenced the cultural situation within Armenia. And I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Well, what happened after the World War II, there was a huge propaganda by Soviet Union, outside Soviet Union, and especially in Armenian diaspora, about repatriation. Because as any empire, they needed more people. They needed more people for work and other purposes for their socialist propaganda and ideas to spread thoroughly around everyone. But it was very misleading. So as Soviet Union was was leading the victory in the World War II, many in diaspora thought that it was like this land of honey and milk, and they repatriated to Armenia, and they faced the harsh reality of poverty, of starvation, and many artists who repatriated from Europe and from the Middle Eastern countries like Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Iraq, or from France and US and etc., they didn't expect that. Many of them were already very established artists in their own countries, like, for instance, Armen Galens or Hagop Hagopian. And Hagop Hagopian, he moved to Armenia from Egypt, and he didn't work for a very long time. Many artists who came to Armenia in the late 40s, they had this breakdown and anxiety. They couldn't work, they didn't understand the new situation, the policies, etc. Many of them were later persecuted by KGB or were sent to Siberia. Many of them were like, whatever, I don't want to go into details. But what happened is as they were from Europe or from Middle Eastern countries which were influenced by Europe, they brought another view, another visual language. In 50s and 60s, you can see how the Armenian art even changes with this new reality, with these new influences. And Hagop Hagopian was only one of them. There were dozens of artists and sculptors who came to Armenia in 50s and late 40s, and they changed themselves because they found themselves in a new environment, as including artistic environment. But also they influenced the local art scene. And later it happened also through diaspora, but with other paths. Not only people coming, but also as we had this huge diaspora, they would send some magazines, there were some relationship with relatives, or for instance, how Armenian art scene found out about Arshil Gorky and how he influenced all these artists, especially Seyran Khandlamajan and others from his period. It all happened only in 60s. That's why when we are talking about abstractionist art or later photorealism or hyperrealism or Dada movements, etc., like this neo-Dada, it all was happening out of nowhere, or maybe later compared to the world realities, but it was unique for Soviet Union and Soviet Armenia because it shouldn't have been. It was restricted. These artists, they would do that because they couldn't not do that. They didn't do it for artists union and stuff, and it was a very hard survival reality for them. Because if you weren't part of the artists union, you wouldn't get commissions, you wouldn't get exhibitions, so you needed to have other jobs, officials, because if you didn't work, you might have a criminal record for not working. So this was the reality. They all had some side hustles, you know, if you put in the modern words.
Yes, thank you. We are running out of time, and as a final concluding question, I wanted to ask you, what does this exhibition contribute to the broader cultural landscape surrounding Armenian art, both historically and today?
Լայն իմաստով այս հայ արվեստի համար ինչ է այս ցուցադրությունը, ինչ է տալիս։
Նախ եւ առաջ ես ուզում եմ ասել, որ թեպետ այս բոլոր հեղինակները եւ աշխատանքների մեծ մասը շատ հայտնի են Հայաստանում, բայց քանի որ Նարթեն Դաջը դրանք գնելուց հետո արտահանել էր Խորհրդային Միությունից, շատերի գտնվելու վայրը մենք չգիտենք եւ անգամ հեղինակները չգիտեին, դեպքերի մեծ մասում։
First of all, many of these pieces are really famous in Armenia, like around art community, around scholars especially. But some of us, many of us, including the artists, didn't even know until just the recent times about their whereabouts. Like they didn't know where these pieces are. They knew that they were purchased somehow because Northern Dutch also worked with agents. So they didn't know much about their placement geographically or just what collections they end up in.
Եվ այս ցուցահանդեսի շնորհիվ Հայաստանում նաև շատ ավելի հայտնի դարձավ ոչ միայն Northern Dutch Collection-ը, այլ Zimmerli թանգարանը, հիմա բոլորը այնտեղ դրա մասին են խոսում մեր այս պրոյեկտի շնորհիվ։ Այսքան էլ ասա։
And so, as a result, now not only people have known more about Northern Dutch collection, but also about Zimmerli Art Museum. Like, it's one of the topics very actively discussed in the art community far away in Armenia.
Եվ քանի որ մենք այսօր ապրում ենք այնպիսի իրականության մեջ, երբ աշխարհը շատ փոքրացել է եւ ժամանակը կարծես վերացել է, մենք տեխնոլոգիաների դարաշրջանում ենք ապրում, երբ թվում է շատ ավելի տարբեր իրարամերժ աշխարհները պիտի ավելի մոտիկ լինեն իրար, այդ առումով Ամերիկայում բացահայտել հայ արվեստը կարծում եմ տեղացիների համար պիտի հետաքրքիր լինի, իսկ մեզ համար իհարկե մեծ հպարտություն է մեր արվեստի այս իրոք ունիկալ եւ գեղարվեստական առումով բավական բարձրարժեք գործերը այս կոնտեքստում ներկայացնելը։
So it is we are very lucky to present Armenian art in this context, and also it is very important that not only Armenians found out about Armenian art abroad in the context of modern and contemporary art in the Western institution, but also the local audience will reveal some aspects of Armenian cultural heritage that weren't put out there. I think I've translated it correctly. I hope I haven't missed anything. And well, for me, what is really exciting about these exhibitions, as Jeremiah told in his opening speech, that we art historians and curators who focus mostly on modern and contemporary art, we see that Armenian culture is mostly associated with our Christian heritage and the medieval times. And Jeremiah told about this exciting, amazing exhibition that took place around 7-8 years ago at Metropolitan Museum with the title Armenia and an exclamation mark at the end, which is really bold. But with that title, you think, okay, I'm gonna go and see Armenia. But you go and see like, I don't know, 400 years of cultural heritage, considering that the country is over, like, I don't know, 2,000-3,000 years old, and the last 100 and 150 years is not that much presented, if presented at all. And this is very exciting that this is, and I'm not exaggerating, this is the first time ever that Armenian art is presented on such a scale for this period in any museum outside Armenia. There were galleries, there were fairs, there were different initiatives and very interesting projects, maybe around diaspora, around Armenians, very little things. But it is for the first time that any institution, especially when we are talking about Western museums, that would present Armenian art beyond the very popular and amazing medieval cultural heritage. There is not much research, there is not many books. Even in Armenian, there are a little of them. And some of them are Russian, some of them are Armenian, but in English, there are a couple of books. There are maybe 2-3 catalogs. But we really hope that this exhibition and the future website will open up a new opportunity for art historians, for researchers. Because when we are talking about Soviet art, for decades, Soviet art equals Russian. This was the thing for decades. And only in the last 10-15 years, some institutions, some researchers, some museums, they're like, oh, there is more to that. There is Kazakhstan, there is Uzbekistan, there is Georgia, there is Armenia, there is Lithuania, there is Latvia. I can go like 15 different republics with their 15 different art. And it all can be under this one umbrella. They are all very unique and different. Of course, we can't be unbiased. For us, this is the most unique. You know, like talking about opening the first modern museum art in 1972 and seeing the scale of art. If you go through, even for us, it was really not only essential, but also very emotional. When we just saw the exhibition, Lilit and I, for the first time, we got goosebumps. We were like filled with joy and excitement, and seeing the cathedral at the end and going through the exhibition, seeing these old pieces for the first time, working in the collection for the last couple of weeks. And again, thank you for this opportunity. And this is, I don't know how much will the local audience appreciate this exhibition. I hope that they, through the text that we worked on, through the brochure that will be spread, they might dig and see more into that we would even hope. Because sometimes you think about the exhibition, you, like as a curator, and you think the way you assume that the audience would perceive the show, but they go like in a different way, and they found out something that you would never imagine. Like some of our colleagues here pointed out something that I couldn't even see, and that was really amazing for us. So I hope it's not extra here to say that I want to congratulate Zimmerli Art Museum, all of you guys, us of course, for for opening here the show and working with this amazing staff, and Yulia and everyone. And Jeremiah also talked about the staff who would take care about these pieces so delicately and with such a love, like Betty opening up for us the storages and working with us. And a curator, the word curator, it has this Latin root in it, like taking care, right? You take care about something, curare, that's the word, to take care. And I think art and artists are those who needs caring the most. And that's what this exhibition is about. It's caring about art, which doesn't have any borders, and I think I might go on and on, but I think it's enough. Thank you very much.
I think we will open the floor to questions from a couple of questions from the audience. Please feel free. Yes.
Just to give it a little bit more of a context, in Karakal-Pakistan, in Uzbekistan, there's an autonomous Republic of Karakal-Pakistan, and there is a very obscure museum, but some people do know about that because it contains one of the most striking Soviet period modern art, non-conformist even collection. Do you relate the history of this first in the Soviet Union modern art museum opened in 1972? Do you relate that to those developments in other republics like Uzbekistan?
Yes, I start. Yes, there is indeed a museum that was opened by Igor Savitsky. That museum mostly about earlier period, because Savitsky collected pieces, I think started to collect from the 20s and 30s. It was another example, and we worked with we made a few events devoted to Savitsky Museum. We even at a certain point tried to invite then director of the museum, Marinika Babanazarova, to visit the Zimmerli, which she unfortunately couldn't do because of some administrative visa issues. But of course there are correlations with the Dodge collection, but I think that the museum in Yerevan, from what I understand, was devoted specifically to non-conformist art, the art of from earlier too. Well,
No.
this is my understanding, so I can open the
Well, when we are talking about this Museum of Modern Art, opened in 1972, for that museum specifically, I wouldn't use that term, because it's like, I think for that museum and for the collection that Henryk Higitsan was collecting, I think the term non-conformist a little bit bold, but they were still artists of national modernism that wouldn't be part of the socialist realism. Well, in that regard, yes. So it was, yeah. In that regard, yes, it was artists. It were artists of Minas Avetisyan generation and later on. But it was also, with the Museum of Modern Art in Armenia, it was very specific to this, art historian Henryk Higitsan. It was very his own thing. He was very influential later on, but just to give you a little bit of context.
Yes, so basically there are certainly a parallel with, again, because Savitsky, it was also kind of one person undertaking when someone kind of, almost heroically would organize something that would be, not in line with the government and with the officials. And it is symptomatic that both museums were not in the central part of the Soviet Union, but in the countries that were, more remote from Moscow region. But thank you so much for this question. Yes. Any other questions?
Can we see with Armenian artists who participated? Are they here?
Yes.
Two of them, two artists are
please,
here.
would you introduce them? Представьте, пожалуйста, художника.
They want to meet the artists. So one is Ashot Ashot, sitting just in the front row. And the other one, please, Eduardjan, would you stand up? And the other is Eduard and Sargsyan. And also Vigen Tadevosyan's daughter has come to the opening which is also very exciting for us.
I have my voice without any microphone. You know, I'm so happy when you mentioned Yesayants. I met Yesayants 1970s in Kostaki collection. And she not have idea about museum style, believe me. But Kostakis, it's very influential person. I met Kostakis 17 years old, and I become collectors, you can imagine. Everybody who meet in Kostakis place, everybody want to do museum, not impossible to museum in other places. But thank goodness Yesayants do it 1972.
Thank you for
And,
that remark.
Of course, it's a lot of tragic story about Yesayants, like fire in the studio, etc., etc. But after this meeting, I come to see Armenian artists. You know, in Baltic Sea, I fly regularly. You know, it's much close, but for take the tickets to Yerevan, it's impossible to buy the tickets for fly, believe me.
Yes, I can imagine.
You need to be some friend who do these tickets for Yerevan while. But thank you so much, and I enjoy your speech.
Thank
both
you.
of you, and of course Yulia. And of course, congratulations with this exhibition, and I'm so happy. When I begin collection, not on Dutch 1974, but mostly this is the beginning Moscow and St. Petersburg, you know. But after George, a lot of pre-Baltic, he not travel in Baltic this time, but I bring him pieces.
Okay.
You know, but this museum, Zimmerli Art Museum, unique in the world. And this is my favorite place in the world.
Armen, իմիջիալից ասա, որ
Thank you very much, Tatiana. We have time for maybe one or two questions, please. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for organizing this incredible exhibit. I love it, I love it, I love it. And I just wanted to ask you, I know that there's a lot of political controversy in our government. Is it possible to have an exhibit supporting the Armenian political prisoners in Baku and the Artsakh refugees that are not being taken care of properly? And also, are you able to deal with controversial issues like violence against women? Like there was 100 corrective rapes of lesbians by their own families. Are you able to deal with controversial issues like that?
Well, I would point out that it's like this question is more related to 2025. And we are talking about the exhibition of the post-Soviet country, like Soviet period, non-conformist art from 60s to 90s. But it's a very hard and delicate issue. And I don't think that here we can talk about that or here we can present that. It's more related to Armenia, and in Armenia there are being projects and exhibitions related not only to the recent war, but also to the prisoners, to the things going on about the neighbors and the war, which is still not over. That's a very bold and delicate issue, but it is very related to today. The exhibition is related to the today, but in a case of research of the past. So many of the artists which you mentioned, and when we are talking about like comparing the Armenian scene and, for instance, the Moscow scene and the Soviet period, Moscow non-conformist art was mostly very political, and for Armenian non-conformist, like when we like for Sots art and etc. and the other Moscow conceptualist art, for Armenian non-conformist art was not so much about politics as much as about aesthetics. So how the aesthetics of Armenian art didn't go with in the same line as socialist realism aesthetics. I think that was one of the main differences also when we are talking about non-conformist art in Armenia and other countries. I just wanted to share that as well. But what you mentioned is really important today, and I hope that something good and positive will happen in that regard, but taking into consideration what is going on around the world, and also for you here, guys. So I don't see any like very quick untangling of the situation in the near future, but I really do hope that it will end up soon, and we will have peace not only in Armenia but around the world.
Thank you so much, Armen and Lilit. I would invite everybody to join the reception upstairs, and first of all to see the exhibition in more details, and then to join the reception upstairs. We have some Armenian wine that you can try. Please feel free also to inquire about what you see in conversations with Armen, Lilit, and myself. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.